panel, DISversity. We're going to talk about whether or not we feel that Disney is doing enough to diversify both the Marvel and the Star Wars franchises. But before we get started, I thought it would be a good idea to introduce ourselves. So we are the Concentrated Podcast. We are a podcast for Blerds, by Blerds, where we talk about a bunch of different things. We've got several different versions of our show that we do. We actually have a series called the Imperial Dispatch that is focused on Star Wars. We've got Heralds of the MCU that is focused on the MCU. We have Throwing Bows, which is about MMA. We also have Cup and Saucer, where we talk a lot about British programming, and then our main Concentrated, where we just talk about everything. So with that, my name is Maria. I go by the pronouns she, her.
Manira, she, her.
Eric, he, him.
And so let's jump right in. So the first thing that we want to talk about before we can even start talking about the actual issues within Marvel and Star Wars is the fact that we need to make sure we're all on the same page about what diversity means. So for a lot of people, diversity means that they want to see more of themselves, but in reality, it's supposed to be a range of human differences that we should be seeing in everything that we do. So that means that it includes obviously ethnicity, it includes sexual orientation, education, religion, physical ability, gender, socioeconomic status, nationality, and of course, race. Now, a lot of times people will talk about diversity and inclusion and use the terms interchangeably, but they are not the same thing. When you talk about inclusion, you're talking about what concrete methods and strategies you're using to make all team members in whatever environment it is feel accepted and engaged within the entire team. So when it really boils down to how do you make people feel in a situation, whether that's work, a social situation, whatever it may be. So it's about making people feel included, making people feel listened to, making people feel respected, making people feel safe, making people feel encouraged, making them feel valued, making them feel accepted, and lastly, making them feel welcomed. So again, we talk about all of these terms interchangeably, but they are not one and the same. You can have diversity without inclusion, and you can have some inclusion without having full diversity. So it's really important to just think about it that way. So as I stated when we first started, this is not just going to be us talking at you guys. This really is intended to be a facilitated conversation. So I want to ask the audience whether or not you guys believe that diversity, or what should diversity and inclusion look like within both the Star Wars and the MCU franchises. So if you're interested in jumping in the conversation, please just raise your hand and introduce yourself. Please tell us your pronouns. We want to make sure that we are addressing people properly, and give your thoughts.
We, he, him, and I guess the original Miss Marvel was black. We'll go back. And so I need to see her in all her potential represented in the MCU. But then I also would add to that the newer edition, Ironheart.
Mm-hmm.
So I want them to look back and be inclusive and engage diversity in that manner. And I want them to look to the present and future with the fact that Ironheart has stepped in. I don't want no more Robert Downey Jr. So that's one smidgen of what I think it should be.
Okay. Oh, did you want to ask a follow-up? Go ahead.
I do. Why would you want to see that?
Well, I think it's important. I mean, let's look at it this way. T'Challa, Black Panther, via Chadwick Boseman, was phenomenal acting.
R.I.P.
Gave us a very powerful, and so did Cuba,
Michael
Killmonger,
Jordan.
Michael Jordan. Powerful black men. So where are the powerful black women? Well, we had to throw a melange, but I'm saying these are very important representations, I think, for women, for young girls, especially young black girls. I mean, that black girl magic is, I think, not represented enough. And so that's why I named it.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Tia, she, her. So I want to piggyback off that, agree and disagree. So when I think of inclusion and I think diversity and inclusion, I think of not only like people of color, people with disabilities, but specifically these people and these characters with their own story. The idea of a black female Iron Man, while the comics are great and the MC is great, when it comes to, I would prefer someone when it comes to like Black Panther who is their own person, their own story, and it comes from someone like that. Because I don't feel like when people think about people who are non-white, who are able-bodied, who are, straight, anything like that, they think everyone else is just them, but a different color, but a different orientation or something like that. And that's honestly not true. Like, black people, while we may be people, we are still a completely different set of people with our own stories, with our own struggles that we go through. And just like everybody else, like LGBT people, just like people who are disabled, we have a completely different experience. And I don't feel like it's fair to just pin us over and make us over here.
So you want us to have complex stories.
Complex stories, but also our own solo stories.
Yeah.
That's right.
And make new future stories as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hold on one second.
Make new stories, make new characters that moving forward into the future that are more powerful. Characters of color as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm Michael. I think the point about Ironheart is a good point. But
Okay.
Eve Ewing is writing it now, and for anybody who doesn't know, Eve Ewing is like an incredible author. She wrote Ghost in the Schoolyard. She's probably like one of the smartest people on the planet when it comes to race, culture, and the rest. So she talks explicitly about inheriting.
Hold on a second.
Michael, can
would
you
you mind
stand up?
standing up and being a little louder?
Sorry. She talks explicitly about inheriting the character of Ironheart as this young black girl from Chicago who's with lots of trauma. She saw her real dad die before she was born. Her stepdad dies in front of her best friend, like all this trauma. And she's supposed to be black girl Iron Man. And she inherited that. But as she's been writing it, she talks about looking at the neighborhood that she comes from, looking at her experiences, trying to write her as a real human being. She gave an interview and she was like, I don't believe she would go to the police after apprehending said bad guy. And often that's the thing superheroes do. They capture the bad guys. Here's your officer, they're rocked out for you. And Eve Ewing has said, that's not her reality. She wouldn't do that. So I think that's a particularly bright example. Not all of hers, but Eve Ewing's Ironheart is good.
Awesome. Yes. Right here. Yes, you're
Hi,
here.
Sean, she, her. For the Star Wars franchise, we've seen an evolution, Princess Leia, her evolution as a leader, and then Rey's introduction. I'd love to see, in terms of gender, women being evil. I'd love to see a female Sith Lord.
Yes.
I wanted to see Rey turn, and women are allowed to have a dark side and, succumb to that power and have that power in control. So that would be great to see.
Awesome.
I just wanted to add, Scrabble Shooter. Have you played Fallen Order?
I don't know.
So good.
Female character, her name is Trella, is Stephanie's sister. She's played by black women. So I just wanted to let you know that there are they're new.
There's something.
Yeah.
I love her. Jedi Fallen Order.
There's also characters like Asajj Ventress from the Clone Wars, who is she's not technically a Sith, but she works for the Sith, and she's one of the most amazing, badass characters in Star Wars. We haven't seen her in live action yet, and hopefully it's convoluted because of the way that Star Wars works with timelines, but I've been talking about wanting to see her in live action for years. So she's one of my absolute favorite characters in Star
Hold on one
Wars.
second.
I'd like to add to that as well.
Oh, go ahead.
And it's also different when Disney moves ahead with their movies and the live actions. And that when they show their characters inclusiveness, and it's a little bit of a challenge for them where they're coming from. I think that they really need to step up in showing their examples of their characters instead of stepping behind. I think they need to rise to the challenge of that.
I got you two right here. All right, so the gentleman right here.
Oh no, I was just going to add about Darth Talon. I would love to
Yes.
see her. I would love to see her
Yeah.
in any type of live action thing because she's my favorite.
Oh yeah, I second that.
Tyler, she, her.
Okay.
Just to piggyback off of hers statement, I feel as though, as much as I love the MCU, I feel as though with like, I don't know if anyone's seen the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yes.
I feel as though they tiptoe towards the very big, obvious issue about Sam being Captain America, but they didn't like really delve into it.
Oh, yeah.
Like they're chipping at the line. It's like, let's talk about it because it's a thing.
Yeah.
It is a thing that happened when it first happened. I think a lot of the response initially wasn't exactly the best.
Right.
So I'm like, talk about it.
Yeah.
It's a big thing.
Well, and guys, we're actually going to dive a little bit deeper, specifically into just Marvel and just the MCU, because I don't know about y'all, but I could talk about this stuff all day, and unfortunately, we don't have all day. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about was when we think diversity and inclusion, sometimes, and I know I can admit that I have been guilty of it, we very much think in a silo. We think about the ways that diversity affect us and our own intersectionality, and we don't think about other ways that, and other groups that are marginalized and also need to be better represented. So two things that I wanted to specifically point out, because I think that everyone in the room will probably agree with me, and if you don't, raise your hand, but we tend to think of diversity around specifically gender orientation, race, ethnicity, and sex. Those are the big four that we always think about. But what we tend not to think about are neurodiversity, disabilities, and age. And class. Socioeconomic class is another one that we think about, we don't think about it enough. And so, because I know, especially for a lot of people, the world is moving fast, we're learning about new things, I really wanted to make sure that we highlighted that we have these groups. We have individuals, 20% of our population, that have some form of neurodiversity, and you never see that either represented in the character, or if you see the character, think Dustin Hoffman as Rain Man, you have someone who is not neurodiverse playing a neurodiverse character. And so that's an area that we don't see a lot of it.
Or playing them as a superhero.
Right,
Sorry.
or definitely playing them as a superhero. Also with disabilities. You know, and we're going to talk about it a little later, but there have not been any disabled characters in the MCU. And if there is someone on screen who appears to be disabled, they are played by a non-disabled person. It's the same thing in Star Wars. We've only had a total of, Eric, I believe three
Yeah.
characters that had, or that are considered disabled, and they're just considered disabled because they're little people. They played Ewoks and R2-D2. So the question for everybody in the room is, when you think about diversity, are you already considering all of these other groups? Or do you focus your diversity just on your group and why?
Safe space.
Yes, and by the way, it is an absolutely
judgment.
safe space. There is no judgment here. Anyone?
This young lady.
Yes.
I think your first comment about people wanting to see themselves on screen, you automatically, if I'm
Which is fair.
I'm trying to think of the show. I can't remember the name of it, but it was on ABC back in the 80s or 90s with Patty LuPone, and the actor had Down syndrome. Yeah.
Oh,
Is it
Family
Corky?
something maybe.
The name of the character was Corky, but I don't remember
Yeah.
the name of the
Yeah.
show.
Okay.
Mhm. Anyone else?
see, and even for that time, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go here and then over there.
Hi, I'm Whitney. Sometimes you see often in movies or TV shows people who think, especially with deaf people, the actor themselves are deaf, but it's actually not true at all.
Mm-hmm.
What you don't see often is a lot of deaf actors, unfortunately. There are a lot of wonderful deaf actors. There's a play, there's one place where this girl made a movie. Oh, the movie's called A Quiet Place.
Mm-hmm.
And the girl is actually truly deaf. And that's what we need more of, so
Yeah.
people can understand the culture of the deaf community. And nobody needs to actually teach the actor how to behave deaf or how to sign deaf because
Yeah.
they're not themselves
Right.
deaf.
Right.
You don't need the coach.
Exactly.
100% agree.
Good actress as well.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that
Yes.
movie's
Yeah.
amazing. Both
That
of
is a
them.
really good movie.
That's
Yes,
the
absolutely.
director wanted to place a deaf person to do actually that role. So it's up to the director that makes those decisions.
Yep.
It was really blessing. It's funny, I was just telling the interpreter, Susan, about it. And then you mentioned it, so let's bring it up.
Yeah, and that needs to happen more.
Absolutely.
We need that more frequently. And I loved seeing that. It just meant a lot to me to see a deaf actor. And also to see them playing with hearing people or to be playing with the hearing parts, you know.
Yeah.
That was a really interesting dynamic for me. And it would be nice to see that happening more frequently.
And spoiler alert, she
Absolutely.
is a hero.
Yeah.
But yeah. She, if
she
you
is
haven't
the
seen
hero.
it, she is the hero.
I think the other thing was that we were immersed in an environment where we could not hear ourselves. So we were given that experience as well. It was a powerful movie for me.
Absolutely.
Yes, exactly. And that's what needs to happen more often. When I go to a movie, there's no excuse for me. There's nothing for me there. And I just have to kind of sit through and muddle through. If they have captions, the machine's not clear, it doesn't work.
Right.
I have to try and figure it out for myself. You know, I love that movie. I had several favorite parts of that movie.
Awesome. Now, I believe there was someone on this side with their hand up.
I did. Like you said, when you're part of a marginalized community, you try to be inclusive, like with women, especially Black women, when they're not in the space of, say, maybe a drama or a comedy, quote unquote Black comedy. When you see them in a sci-fi space, you're just like, oh.
Mm-hmm.
I could be
just
there.
Seeing one of us, you know, and sometimes you're just so happy to see it that you're not even thinking about anything else.
Right.
Like to this day, I'm gonna be mad about Sleepy Hollow.
Madam.
That'll be the 2021 panel because we can do a whole panel about
You
that.
know, so like when that happened, but it wasn't just her, but there was so much diversity in that
Cast,
first
yep.
season.
It was
Whether
John
they
Cho
were-
dying,
whether
and
they were
then,
Latino,
yeah.
they were
Yes.
indigenous people.
Yes.
It was populated by so many
Yes.
different things. I think their daughter had a disability, so it was all there. So I just laughed it all up, and I wish we had more shows like that. But you know, white showrunners can sometimes just reel things to the ground, especially because they don't know how to handle their audience or don't know their audience. So when I see it, I'm just like, that's the first thing that comes to me, and then I tend to then start thinking about everything else. But I'm just like, can we get a Black woman in there first?
Just feeling included
Right.
is sometimes enough.
Exactly.
To go with your question about considering other groups, my job did this activity, privilege activity, where, because a lot of times when you're part of a minority or part of a marginalized group, you do get stuck with thinking just about that. And when we did this privilege activity, you had to look at what areas are you privileged? Because a lot of times we think if we're a woman or if we're black, so we're not privileged. And we are sometimes in terms of socioeconomic or religion or in terms of where you live. You know, what groups do you belong to that you do have privilege. And really when we did that activity, so many people did start thinking about other groups besides themselves. I think it's a great activity to do at your job with everybody, because it does bring up, it forces you to have to consider all of the different groups you belong to, and then all of the other groups that are not being represented.
And honestly, that's part of the reason that we added this question, right? Because it's real easy to come in here. I am an Afro-Latina, bisexual woman that may or may not be neurodiverse. I know my husband thinks I'm crazy, but I don't know, to the extent. So it's real easy for me when I look at things to only think about those aspects. But then I have, a friend with a son on the spectrum. I have a nephew that's on the spectrum. Am I thinking about that? Am I thinking about all of these other groups? So we didn't want to create a space where we started talking about the franchises specifically without first kind of making sure we're all opening our minds a little bit to what we all should be looking at. Did you have something?
Just quick, I was going to say we're talking about great discussions about diversity, but also I just wanted to just make a note about, systemic systems. What makes a show sellable? Not that I'm saying I'm the expert of that, but sometimes things are molded based on what they think or what they feel would be the most possible product. And so the sticky part is a lot of folks who are diverse are left on the wayside because we're not ready to see it yet, or at least that's what the perception is. So I just talk about if we're going to bring these changes, which I think it is, there's going to be some grand systemic changes that we're going to be experiencing before that.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Miwila, she, her, hers, and my pronouns.
Well, thank you so much, because that is an excellent segue into us moving into starting to talk about these franchises. Because to that point, when we look at Star Wars before Disney bought them, exactly. Everybody has this big new space universe and we all love it.
Go ahead and say corporate theory real quick. Go ahead and say that real quick.
No, I'm not going to do it because you already did. And for the first, 25, 30 years of the franchise, we had a grand total of 10 characters of color that had at least one line. And listen, we got to put an asterisk by the first one because everyone knows that James Earl Jones just did the voice. Who was in the suit, Eric?
David Prowse.
There you go, David Price. He's like a walking. But then you fast forward, and after Disney purchased it, the list got a whole lot longer, right? Which should be a win, and this is as of 2012.
It's a bit of a win.
It's a bit of a win. But when you look at the fact that there have been 27 movies, over 1,000 credited actors, we had 10 actors of color pre, no directors of color pre. We've got 2 actors with a known disability. We've upped that up to 3 since, and again, all little people that played Ewoks or droids, right? So we never saw them on screen. We've moved up to 35 actors of color, and now 5 directors of color are women, but asterisks on that one as well because they're all just on The Mandalorian. So we go from 10 to 35, which is good, but do you guys think that Disney is doing enough to bring more diversity into this universe?
Also,
I'll start. No.
Sorry, I was going to say a caveat. We did not include upcoming movies like Patty Jenkinson's Rogue Squadron,
right,
and things like that. We're talking about things that are available currently.
Yes.
I think Disney puts itself in.
I'm sorry, can you stand up and speak up
Speak
just
up,
a little
speak up.
bit?
Sorry.
I think Disney kind of puts itself in a prison of being following a formula of what do they think will work out the best financially. So because they put themselves in that box, I They don't want to take any risks. They don't want to take any risks with directors. They want to put just the right amount of actors that are different in any way to not drive away what they believe the audience is going to do. I think that they do just enough to make people think that they see themselves on the screen, but I think that they won't go out of their way to be inclusive if it's too much of an imagined risk. So that's my problem with Disney, but it does seem like an improvement from before.
I wanted to take it back up.
No, go ahead.
Okay, you start picking instead of me.
This young lady over here also said something, so after you, go for
Okay.
it.
Okay. I just want to piggyback off of that and say, like, I completely agree. Like, I feel like Disney's like, hey, here's some characters of color, and now let's get back to Kylo Ren for 3 movies.
Speak it into existence, madam. Thank you so much.
Like, here's Rose Tico, the first, Asian lead in Star Wars that I'm aware of. I could be wrong. I'm
No,
sorry.
you're not.
Here she is for 11 minutes in like a 2-hour movie in episode 9. Now let's get back to Rey and Kylo and Exegol. Like,
Here's John Boyega in the first scene of the trailer of the new movie that gets Manera in the seats, but then you totally don't make him what you thought that he was going to be.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm still angry about it.
Also, I think 11 minutes might be generous on Rose Tico in Rise of Skywalker.
It was so Eric, you're on assigning duty because you.
Oh no, this young lady over here, you got a.
So I'm not gonna say I know Star Wars that well, but I mean I think everybody kind of understands that Star Wars represents this imperialist empire, and the face of imperialist empire is usually a white face. So I get in that instance why they would use usually a white cast for that, but they've got to repress someone. And usually those are people of marginalized people. That is bisexuality, that is by race. And the sheer fact that they're only showing them repressing people that look like them is usually not, doesn't work. Like, I always tell my friend that I like this old sci-fi show called Babylon 5. In that show, it always showed that, yes, we're off in space, we're doing all these things, but there's still racism. We're still going to be, they literally have one where this one alien subjugated another, and then they became free, and now they're trying to deal with the consequences of that. And so like it's like they're too scared to just say it. And that's the issue. That's the issue when I see with Star Wars. I mean, it's a great franchise, but they're just so scared. That's it. I mean.
Now you see who's not wearing the ears, right?
Yeah.
Who's not wearing
I mean, but that's what I see. Like and the show I was talking about, that was in the 90s. So you're telling me something from the 90s had more bravery to talk about all of these conflicts, all of these wars, all of these deaths, and you're telling me this Star Wars franchise can't do the same thing. So that's where it disappoints me.
You have two gentlemen in the back.
So, I'm wondering what your opinion is on China's effect on diversity in the MCU.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's a whole bag of worms.
The Finn poster?
Do you want to take this one or you want me?
No. What they're talking about is the episode 7 poster.
No, I
when
know, but
released-
do you want to address it or do you want me to?
No,
address
I
it?
just know China is famous for this. They like diversity, especially when you come to different races and different ethnicities and different religions. We all know their treatment of the Uyghur Muslims currently going on. Like just starting with adding black people to the poster is like just the icing on the cake when it comes to Disney and China.
Yeah. I mean, and to piggyback off of Eric's point and your point, at the end of the day, and this gentleman's point, at the end of the day, it's always going to come back
Still a mega corporation.
to money. Because when you sit here and you even look at what happened between episode 8 and episode 9, and all of the fanboys that were losing their darn minds, losing their minds at the idea that, number one, a man of color could be force sensitive. Number two, that a female was going to be, that a woman was going to be, the one. Like, they lost it. And so what did they do? Disney went back, they pulled back from what was happening, which I thought was great. Rey did not need to be Palpatine's granddaughter. That was stupid, right? And they went right back to the formula that made, cisgendered white male fans happy and comfortable. So we could, again, that could be a whole nother panel going deep into that one.
I say, but to calm people down, they brought back Lando Calrissian.
Right. So you have the gentleman with the white. No. The gentleman over here with the white.
You had a question, sorry?
Gentlemen?
You had a question?
You good now? Okay.
Mr.
Now you're all right.
And then. And then.
They were so scared to only have brown people.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about it.
Just to like attract the young black people.
Yeah.
And it was frustrating because it was garbage in 20-minute film before.
It was so long.
It was like, no. The only reason why they had that short was because, we need something white to attract white people.
I did not even think of that. That's an excellent point.
People thought they were in the wrong movie.
All right.
Did you raised
You
your
had a
hand?
question?
Oh no, I just wanted to mention, so also on episode 9, you had like the first on-screen gay kiss in the Star Wars film. It's in there for 2 seconds. I missed it the first time. I'm gay as shit.
Yeah.
I can easily cut that. I can cut that out. I don't know how to edit videos. So
Right.
it's like,
And they were literally just in the background, barely in focus.
Yeah.
That's
And
not good.
young lady right here.
Yeah.
So they can cut it out with that.
Yeah.
Right,
That
pretty
also
much.
makes sense.
Young lady right here.
I'm always interested in the decision makers, like how do the whole idea of we need to attract white kids, so we need to do this. I wonder how these decisions are made. Like, are there focus groups that are done? Because I have known a lot of kids who really would not care. I mean, they would be glad to see just kids.
Right.
So I'm very interested in knowing the statistics or the facts on who's making the decisions and how they come to the decision that if we do this, we won't make enough money, or if we do this, we won't attract people. If it's just a handful of people who do it because that's what they think, or if there's some real hardcore information that has proven.
Yep.
I didn't say my name first. I'm sorry, Michael. Ian.
Thank you, Michael.
So I didn't know about that Frozen thing in front of Coco, and kind of piggybacking off of what you said, I can't imagine that there was much of a focus group in a situation like that, because if people thought they weren't in the right movie, was it ever advertised that there was a short in the first place?
Right.
And then also in terms of like what works, like a lot of times things will stay relatively formulaic because at the end of the day, these people are trying to make money. They want to make another movie. They want to keep these people employed, and that's unfortunately the biggest driving decision of anything, because unfortunately, with the point that was made about Babylon versus Star Wars, which one of those series is still running?
Yeah.
Like, unfortunately, despite the great writing that was in that, and a lot of things, because I'm with Babylon, I was a fan too. but unfortunately, I think that show was way ahead of its time. It would probably work a lot better now, but Disney has always and will always be a formulaic thing. They are never there to push the thing. The only gambit they push is how much money they can put into making the same thing again.
Well, before we move on, I want to kind of piggyback because you're half right on that.
Yes.
Disney's only focused on making money for Disney stockholders. It's not about keeping people employed. It is about making their stockholders happy with the dividends that they get.
Oh, when I said people, I meant themselves.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well,
this is so I can make my paycheck.
yeah, but see, but here's
And also China.
But
I gotta
see,
make that
here's the
happen, too.
thing that we don't think about as disenfranchised communities. You know how you make Disney start doing what you want them to do? Buy their stock and become a stakeholder, right?
Right.
Because then we own a piece of it as well, and enough of us don't. So to the point, they're going to cater to their stockholders, which tend to be cisgendered white men, and keep that formulaic thing going. So, yeah. All the way in the... Oh, Eric, yeah, well, I'm sorry, because
You first,
I just
yeah.
keep doing this.
No,
Eric's
no.
job.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to bring back up pertaining to the stockholders and everything like that.
Can you
Can you
speak up a little bit?
just a little bit?
Yes, ma'am. I was interested in discussion. Obviously, it's about the money of the stocks, but the basis to that is, especially like different from American
Sherry.
Yeah, Sherry, remember like on the front, on the centerpiece of the poster in China, there was the back. In Black Panther, you had his mask off, but in China, you had the whole suit on.
Yep.
So like, it's clear, like, again, we're talking about the first, like the blade comes from the blade racism that they just hold over there in that culture.
Yeah.
Like, is there any kind of conversation of blade we can include that to improve this? Like I said, the racism is so like the money is basically racism.
So it ends up kind of being what came first, the chicken or the egg, because there have been lots of articles that have been done talking about the effects of China on Western media. And, you know, there's a misnomer that the Chinese audience won't show up for movies with black people. That's not necessarily true. It just has to be the right black people. So if you put out something with Denzel or something with Will Smith, they do incredibly well in China. But the reality is, because there have been some misses with, you know, movies that have had black leads that aren't those two people, well, what's ended up happening is Hollywood then says, well, we're going to make sure that we don't make that mistake again, and then just keep pushing this same narrative of the Tom Cruises and Brad Pitts and everything else. So then it becomes this cycle, right? Because after Black Panther came out, Black Panther did amazing in China, which no one expected because it was a black ass movie. No one was expecting that to happen, and yet and still it did. So I'm not going to sit here and try to say that there isn't racism. We all know that that's not true. Coming out of China towards black people, but there is at least a diagram kind of there, a blueprint to show that if you give them something that is just good, regardless of who's in it, they will show up and they will watch it. But Hollywood has to then invest money in things with black people that are actually good and people want to see. So it becomes that cycle. All right, so anybody else before we start talking about Marvel?
Yes,
Just a suggestion to your statement about purchasing stock, or a suggestion will also be education, because it's one thing to purchase stock and
Right.
say produce this film, but to have representation in the development of the film, directors, producers, also filmmakers, things like that was the tangible components of building films. I think that would be helpful as well, because you could always throw someone in there and say, just do this for us because they told us to.
Right.
And that can be a mess in itself, and it's happened before, and it's been a mess.
Yep.
So just a thought.
No, I think that that's an excellent point, because exactly, and we've all had to sit through lots of those instances where we get just garbage things because they just threw someone in the room or threw something on the wall and just hoped it stuck, right? So now when we look at the MCU, because I don't know about you guys, but before we decided to do this panel, I always just had this idea in my head where, I mean, the MCU could be better, but they're doing really good, right? Came to find out maybe my assumption was a little wrong, right? Excuse me. So prior to the Disney purchase of the MCU, there were about 20 actors of color who had at least one speaking line. Now, I want to give a caveat.
And that's prior to Disney purchasing Marvel as a whole. We only stopped at 2012 when the Marvel deal 2009 when the Marvel deal went through, and that was after the only two MCU films were Iron Man and The Incredible Hulk, the first one. So we didn't include, there's a couple of terrible X-Men movies that we didn't include on here. We included all the Blade movies, and
You should have included that because y'all put Jar Jar Binks on the Star Wars.
Oh yeah.
That poor man. We're just gonna leave that there.
Yeah.
So now when we look at what they've done since, holy smoke, right? Like, this list is huge, or at least it appears to be huge.
Yeah.
Right.
Because we've gone from 20 to 71. That's really great work, especially for me personally. I was very excited about that last one because Jonathan Majors as He Who Remains.
Spoilers if you haven't seen it yet.
Spoiler. Clap that up. Amazing performance. So they have done some work. But again, you start looking at this franchise, 27 movies, 900 plus credited actors, and we've only had 71 actors of color. We have had no actors with a disability, or at least a known disability. For the record, we're not sure. I don't think we've actually had any members of the LGBTQ plus community either in a role or having that role portrayed on screen.
In Deadpool, yes.
Oh, Deadpool. I forgot about Deadpool. Okay, so you stand corrected there. And we've only seen 3 directors of color or women. And Eric, they were.
You
Oh,
put me
see,
on the
I
spot now.
thought you were going to be able to rattle them off. Obviously, it's Coogler with Black Panther, and it was 2 women.
Chloe Zhao is doing the Eternals, and I forget the young lady, one of the 2 directors of Captain Marvel.
Right.
Yes. Yes,
Oh, right,
Taika
and Taika Waititi. Yep. And that's it. So again, now we got to start looking at our superheroes, and we have to ask ourselves, they're doing better than most. There's no question about that. And when you look at what we know is coming out in phase 4, we know we're going to get a lot more diversity. But we know we're getting a pretty much completely Asian cast, or mostly Asian cast in Shang-Chi. And when you look at the demographics for Marvel in particular, African Americans are doing incredibly well when you consider that they represent 12% of the population and 20% of the main characters in the MCU. That's fantastic, right? But then you look and you see that Latinos represent 18% of the population, and we've got zero Latinos with pretty much, I think, barely more than a line or 2 in a movie. So there's clearly work to be done, but...
Batista, that's about it.
He's Filipino.
And I am completely wrong.
Yeah, I know about my boy. He's Filipino.
Benjamin Bratt, Doctor Strange. Boom, nailed it.
Well, so here's the thing about Zoe. Well, she's behind makeup, and 2, the thing that's tricky with Zoe is that depending on the month, year, where the sun is, yeah, she doesn't legitimately claim it. So, as an Afro-Latina, Zoe, I'm gonna look at you a little side-eye with that. But that's an aside. Yeah, exactly. That as well. So with that, how do we feel about the MCU, guys? Do we think that they're doing enough? Your job, Eric.
Sorry?
So I'm actually, in a way, willing to give Disney more of a pass for Star Wars based on level of films, like how many they've done, and frankly, severity of community a little bit. We're Star Wars fans, but that would be a little bit much. Marvel post-Avengers, Disney post-Avengers to me doesn't have an excuse. You've succeeded. Avengers is where we were. It's a gamble. Post-Avengers 1, we're still going to see all the stupid movies. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Right.
You're the Your Black Panther point. Like, it still does well. Because good luck skipping a movie. Sorry. Like, good luck. It doesn't matter at this point. So at this point, they should be pushing that further because they don't have an excuse. You know it's going to do well. And even with the China thing, so you have streaming, which can perform independently, in my opinion, of China, and still, like, so to not spoil too much into a very recent series, but there's a moment in Loki that someone who identifies as queer makes me very happy until I go, wait, that one line got me really excited?
Right.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Literally one throwaway line, and then we go right back to a very heteronormative main thing.
That right there.
To me, it's like, even in the area where you have an excuse to be bolder because it's not as reliant on, oh no, it's no, we can't, we're sorry. Like streaming, you can perform independently of that. It's still tiptoeing. Like, we're gonna watch it anyway. We're gonna finish every one because we have to clue in.
Yep.
It does not matter what you do, so just do it.
Absolutely.
And it was, oh,
I'll say-
young lady in the back.
Yes.
Oh, I'll get you next. Her.
I'm noticing too, like they'll try to say that this character is canon, this character is whatever. Like they'll confirm it, but they won't like show it.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that part.
They're trying to get like the brand points for like, yeah, this person is diverse.
Without doing the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, right.
Amy Cheever. I feel like to reinforce both those points, like at least comparing the MCU to Star Wars, the MCU doesn't Star Wars. So these decision makers, these shareholders, don't have this really established idea of this is what works. So while we're starting to go the right direction with directors like Coogler and like Taika, and like they're kind of taking the wrong lessons from that, because now we have Taika again.
Yeah.
I love another Ragnarok, but let's see another different point of view.
Yeah.
And then they're going back and retconning characters like Hawkeye to be like, oh no, he was dead the whole time. Like you were saying, like, you don't get points just for saying this was the case after the fact.
Right.
Yeah.
Hold on. Can you speak up?
Yeah. So to address that point, I feel like it's the same thing as when companies, for Pride Month, they'll put out all the stock, all the rainbow everything, but then the second that it's over, all the rainbow stuff goes back to stack and it's shoved and thrown away.
Yeah.
It definitely is like that cash grab sort of thing. But because of the fear of like the cis hetero agenda, they're not willing to go ahead and push further. So it's like, hey, I'll give you your ball and you can play with it, but you're not playing with it front and center. You have to make some fan
Well, this guy's first.
And I'm not sure how it's something that we can combat aside from being vocal about it all the time, like bringing it into areas and trying to like call them out. But I think it is a very important thing to stress on, because they will give you 10,000 male-female kisses and sex scenes, bunches of movies, but you get a peck between people of the same gender.
And then we'll be rated R.
Anything that's
Right.
Yeah.
It'll be rated R.
Especially with Marvel and Disney, like I can imagine, and I'm coming at it from the people, so like I'm very, like I know every, because I look, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Yup.
And they're trying to, and now it's gonna get street right, because now we also know what colorism, right? So we're getting that rising, playing with white guys, playing with
Right.
Right. That speak on it, because that was the whole issue with the New Mutants.
Yeah, and then like now we also think we're finally getting America Chavez. And again, like finally, again, it's also on the lighter spectrum of color.
Right.
Please just stop like Hispanics can be the entire race. Just
Yep.
accept it. Like you can mix and match, like it's fine.
I think Amazon's The Voice, trolls Disney and their Marvel Cinematic Universe the best. I think that they go right to it, and they basically tell you, you guys don't actually care about these situations. And when they made their Wonder Woman version gay, just to try to say she was gay to win their brownie points, and then they hyped that up. When they did have the Daredevil-like character, and their the super being just basically goes and smashes his ears, because heaven forbid anybody with disabilities be in their group, because it has to be picture perfect, the most superhero ableist people ever. Yeah, I mean, it's exactly just piggybacking off what everyone says. They're not actually trying to help with the social fabric, they're just trying to make a buck. And so if this is what sells, if Black Panther can come right on the back of Black Lives Matter, wow, we're winning. We got gold. We're gonna put this out and you're gonna pay, because it's about time. But I'll be honest, when Robbie Reyes, Ghost Rider, like when they make that, I'm gonna go. All right, I'm gonna go see that. They got me there.
Well,
you know what I mean?
we had Robbie Reyes on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show, and he was slotted to have his own show on Hulu, and that suddenly went away.
Yeah, exactly.
The only time I watched that show was when Robert Reyes was on that.
And it was amazing. I wanted his show. He's my Ghost Rider.
Yeah. And so, I mean, yeah, it's just.
All right.
Can I comment?
Yes. Go ahead.
I'd like to.
Oh, yes.
Also, Disney has lost a lot of wonderful actors. I think that they haven't always followed the history of their books as well. And the comics. And looking back, you see the complicated history of everything that's in the comics. And there were some actors actually in the comics that were deaf, and I haven't seen them come up in the movies. And I've seen a lot of characters in the book, a lot of the dialogues, and Star Wars hasn't always done that. I saw the diversity of the color in the books and in the comic books, but I haven't seen the same thing in the movies. And Disney has lost a large portion of that.
Yep, they have.
I miss that.
Absolutely. Yep. But I gotta ask the question, and you guys see it up here, and I know that this question is very triggering for me, depending on who asked me this question. So I want to put it to the group and see how everybody feels, because there are people that believe, like, no, stick to the comics, stick to this. I don't want a black, you know, you get all of that, right? So do you guys feel that adding more diversity actually would hurt either of these franchises or help them? Eric, that's all.
Right.
Ooh, okay.
You first.
I'm not the only triggered person.
So it depends.
Okay.
Because for some, it can definitely hurt. Because there's a vantage point of you're bringing in people, but you're bringing in people just because you're bringing in people. But it can help if you actually make characters that are new characters. For example, like the whole thing with Black Captain America. Awesome, cool, because it's natural. Ironheart, at first I was kind of like, and then, all right, it makes sense. But if you invent new people, and then you can build mythology around them, everybody can win.
Yep.
And it can also hurt if you have people that can't play witches.
I say a prime example of that would be Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. You take an established character like Devil Dinosaur and you create a new character that is interesting and bold and smart. And where's that character now? We're getting an animated show, but that's about it.
This is bullshit.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Alright, so my name is Fred, my name is Ian. Yeah, I do think it's definitely very important for you to write a character that has a good, thorough story and who is overall just well created. But on top of that, when I really think about it, all the time that you see outrage, it's usually filled that movie. I've yet to see a movie where the character changed it went bad, honestly. Pretty much everyone that we changed with a TV show or probably when it's taken over, or as long as they've had their things are backing it, other people have always come to support it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I haven't really seen it. Seen it good now.
Well, a lot of times the movie is just bad to begin with. Like look at Michael B. Jordan as Johnny Storm in the Fantastic Four. The movie was garbage. Yeah, the movie is garbage. He is not garbage in the role.
Sir, we were having
Yes, sir. All right, I got you next.
So I'm in agreement with, sometimes the writers can really screw it up, fuck it up real bad. And I look at the fact that Marvel and their films, we go back to Blade, with Wesley Snipes, as what would be seen as the movie that brings Marvel to the screen in a massive way.
It saved Marvel in the late 90s.
And you would think, in light of, especially with the other points that have been brought up, that the stockholders and Marvel should have learned from that and said, well, damn, we got something here.
Right.
Yeah.
But it seems like, racism raised its head. What other thinking in the room took place? And there was no sort of follow through from what was a very successful example. That's where diversity can help, but people ain't paying attention, ain't caring. And then it does us a disservice because look how long it takes based on the statistics that you've been showing us of representation, where, we still haven't gotten there. We're moving in the right direction, but we got still a lot of failure in regards to raising the level of representation, narratives, and what we can truly experience and celebrate in all aspects of diversity and inclusion.
Get some in the back.
I don't think it's going to hurt it, but the thing is that they're not even putting diversity of characters that are people of color. Like, it's not even on Marvel, but like with Jubilee, she is of Asian descent. I didn't see that. It's the same thing with the actresses that are playing Storm, Logan. Like, these are people of color, but they're not actually representing where they come from. Like, you're losing the diversity by trying to make it more Eurocentric. And so I don't think it will definitely help, because there's so many people. I don't know the actress's name that played the last one, but I know her name. She had a whole little bit on Twitter about
Yes.
it. But
Oh, Manira knows all about that.
That's Manira's girl.
Alexandra Shipp.
Yeah, no,
want
I
this
hate that.
dark-skinned woman to play Storm because that is her character. She's been like that for decades.
Yep. It doesn't help that a lot of times you have white writers and white artists writing the character and giving these characters very Eurocentric looks.
Right. So give me the actual diversity that's already in the comic, and then, I mean, I'm fine with even colorblind thing, but actually give me the diversity that's already there instead of trying to lighten it up or just not even have the character at all.
Yep. This young lady first. I'll get you right next. Okay. Next after.
The first thing I wanted to say was about changing the race of popular characters that are already in existence. Like, okay, cool, it would be great to not be doing this Superman, but I really don't need Superman, right? I would rather have like
That part.
Superman-like character that's already existing in the comics to suddenly get some shine and be a movie.
Yep.
Yeah, I do want to see the Black Batman, but don't make him Bruce Wayne, make him, what was it, Luke Fox?
Lucius Fox or Luke Fox, yes, his son.
Make that character. He's already in existence. We don't need a black Bruce Wayne. It's okay.
Yep.
The other one was, I had a third one too, I forgot it. But the second one was, I'm tired of supporting movies just to support movies. Like, back in the day, it was like, oh, they got a black movie out here. You better go.
You gotta go. Right. Right.
And I remember I did that for George Lucas's Red Tails, and that movie sucked.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I don't ever need you to touch this again. So it's like, I'm at the point in 2021 where if you're going to put a movie out there with diversity, it better be a good one. Captain Marvel was not a representation of women's liberation because you just threw everything on the plate like, oh, she's girl power, yay. No, Spice Girls did that back in the 90s. And quite frankly, Black Widow to me was better as a representation of female empowerment.
Yes.
They actually kicked some ass. But that's another story. And if I remember my third one.
You?
Yes, so I think diversity matters a little bit because it comes to a point, I'm at the point personally where I'm cynical. So don't pander to me, don't give me something just to give me something.
Yes.
Because I already play the game of every form of media of find the black person, find the Asian, find the Latino. It's like, it's always, it's the let's find where's Waldo. So don't give me something just to give me something because I can feel that.
Right.
I think we can all know when they just give us the black character, just to give us the black character. So it's like, hey, black person, shut up. Come to the movie and give me money.
Right.
So I think that's where it could help. It has to be sincere. Like if you're gonna do it and be sincere about it. But that comes to who's the movement, who are making the decisions, and I think that's another discussion for time. But until you have those people in place who are making the money moves, the power moves, you gotta take a little grain of salt. It's like, are you doing it because you actually legit primarily give a shit, or are you doing it because you want to make money? I'm doing it to make money. So it's
Right.
It's a very delicate balance, and most of the time it's like 20-80, like 20% do give a shit, 80% money.
Get Martha all the way in the back. Can you speak up?
Yeah, I think that for this it comes down to doing the diversity properly. And that really dictates if it's helpful or harmful, because they could just take a movie and replace a bunch of characters who don't matter to black people. But what good is that doing black people or Latinos or Asian instead of, I think it's okay to change characters if their race isn't too big of who they are as a character. The
sense.
Yeah.
That billionaire playboy Bruce Wayne is a white boy.
I was like, pretty sure Bruce Wayne's parents probably made their money off the back of slaves as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, look at this.
Yeah, it's the history of Gotham itself.
It comes down to just knowing what they're doing, but they can't do that because they're stuck in this echo chamber of ideas because they're only pulling from people in the top bracket, the top percent of who are supporting, their industries. But those are all typically white people.
Yeah.
And typically white men who could give, two shits typically about someone else's experience.
Hold on. If you had your hand up, can you please raise it again? Because we
don't want to miss anybody.
we see everybody else got triggered and we lost track.
I gotta have something similar to what you said. I think for one, adding diversity to franchises should only help. If it bothers me that much, one more
It's mostly that first part.
Yeah, mostly.
But like, for me, like, I don't like seeing lazy character creation just to appeal to a certain demographic. Like, for the little black girl that's supposed to be Iron Man. Like, that's cool, but like, I don't want to see one of us, her entire existence is attached to this white man.
Yeah.
You could have created entirely different and then like we've been seeing a lot of you see like the Shang-Chi is coming out
All right,
Well,
Black Lightning.
Iron Fist has its own bag of.
We're seeing like the basis of information is already there. You can just like take that and take it, and of course these curves are gonna run out at some point, so we don't have to do great new stuff.
Yeah.
But like you guys said already, like Black Superman, Black Bruce Wayne, like it doesn't like
Right.
these characters already exist. It doesn't
Right.
do anything.
Yeah.
Stop trying to put black people in a situation like attached to a black counterpart just to have somebody exist.
Yeah. It also.
Just stop being lazy.
Yeah. And to your point about Riri Williams, like her entire existence is predicated off this white man's legacy.
Right.
Which is not fair to a new character. Yes, you? You had a question?
So my name is I agree with everything everyone's saying, but I also want to say that at the end of the day, how many votes have been taken from black people and given to white people? So at the end of the day, I understand what you're saying, but I wouldn't mind if black, like, Batman had been black or black, whatever I mean, like, or if they had changed somebody major, because as a kid growing up, it would have been nice to see somebody kicking ass, somebody I looked up to. That was like me. I understand that they had a whole legacy, but we had a whole legacy too that was taken from us.
That part.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
And then the guy
Yeah. Over here.
So
Okay. I got you next.
So we have talked about this a few different times in different ways about how characters will take over and change how it's really okay with different characters.
Can you speak up just a bit? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
We have talked about this before, how it is better if these characters are already unique characters themselves. But once again, that statement about how we don't want to build them off of these legacies. Well, I mean, a lot of times those characters go on to be amazing characters. Like Miles Morales is a star. He is a star. Like they made video games about him. I don't know how people out here address that. So I mean, like sometimes that legacy is just that. It's just there to make sure we get attention. Because a lot of times we have black characters who are created don't get anything. They didn't sell, or somebody didn't sell out, something happened and that died out. And it sucks. I mean, sometimes our original characters, for example, Static Shock, he's a great character, got to authenticity. I'm gonna say sell that well, he got out for years, just now being back. I mean, sometimes it's good to have that initial push in the place where we have people to see it for good times and colleges, so they can initially go out and become great characters. They can go out and become,
Last one, and then we're gonna move to the last question.
Yeah, I mean, it's especially prominent in characters like Jon Stewart, Green Lantern.
Exactly.
That character is, in my opinion, better
The
than
best.
Hal Jordan and better than Guy Gardner, and we still have not seen him in live action. You had- oh.
No, this gentleman right here.
So, what I will say is this, that when it comes to characters of color, there needs to be a more emphasis on the lesser known characters. Like, for instance, Mr. Terrific. How many people know about Mr. Terrific and know the fact that Mr. Terrific is the second smartest man in the DC universe, as well as the second richest man? He's actually richer than Lex Luthor and Bruce Wayne. So, a lot of people don't know about Mr. Terrific, but yet, if you look at the Arrow universe, they really
Yeah,
watered him down.
they really disrespect him. I
They
think
really
that's true.
disrespect him. He's still smart, but he's watered down.
Yeah.
But I think that if we're going to recognize characters of color, we need to recognize the lesser known characters of color and give them their voice. Because Justice League has how many teams? A squad, B squad, C squad. I mean, there's got to be at least a triple A squad or something.
You had one?
Yes, my name's Travis. To get back to the question, is there enough diversity? Does it ruin the franchise? If you guys get a chance, Google Hollywood loses $10 billion a year by undervaluing black writers and creators. And if we think about that as far as handicap or disabled individuals, and what they have to say, what they can direct, and how they can bring us into their universe.
Quiet Place, yep.
And how that helped her, that brought more of her sense to it. I haven't watched that movie, but I'm going to take a look at it.
It's so
It's
good.
good.
You need to
It's
watch it.
good.
So good.
If you also get a chance, please Google Russian trolls help drive the Last Jedi outrage. So Russian trolls and bots are what were behind a lot of people retweeting that there should be a black stormtrooper. Oh my God, there's a black stormtrooper. A lot of that was fueled by Russian bots. This woman up here in the front had mentioned the systemic racism. And if we take a look at that, we haven't dealt with that issue, so we're still dealing with that today. Reasons why we're losing, Hollywood's losing $10 billion a year on franchises, and why we're still dealing with other issues. The last point I'd like to make, we brought up a few times about superheroes and changing their race. If we were to think about, say, the Black Tribbles talked about this on their podcast, a 50-era Superman that was raised by a white family but had to deal with racism, went to school, but he was black. How would that change the story of Superman? How would people look at Superman? And
I'd read that.
out, would he have helped fuel the civil rights movement? Those different things, if you were to look at it in that sense of diversity. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
First off, I want to thank you for how organized you just had all of your thoughts.
I've been taking a speech class.
All right, guys. So we wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for this last question, because it's, in my opinion, always the elephant in the room when you get a bunch of friends and family together to talk about something that really bothers them. And it can turn into an echo chamber of just bitching and complaining, right? But that doesn't fix the problems that everyone here has so eloquently spoken to. So what can we as fans do to force these franchises to be more diverse?
Use our Jedi powers.
When did you get yours?
I think that we're, if anything, is a good representation of what we do and stuff like this. Continue asking more important questions. How he's very, very in-depth conversations as well as asking simple questions. Prime example, one thing like Batman, this diversity when it comes to 25 people, like where's Barbara been at? You know what I mean? Like, she carries Batman throughout his entire movie.
Yeah.
And We haven't seen her not once.
She's just now coming in Titan season 3.
Okay, so like, it's like some acting.
I got this gentleman. I got you.
Did you get the like trigger these conversations? Did you get the lady at the bottom? They didn't know because the lady at the bottom. You know how we gonna like act like.
Right behind the gentleman. She's got me.
Oh.
Absolutely.
So of course, controlling our dollars is always going to be the number one thing. You know, deciding what we go watch and what we don't watch. But something that we've already been doing really well is making our voices heard. Something that's really good about this now, and the reason why we're seeing a little bit of change, not bad change, a little bit of change is because Twitter is such a big thing, and it influences the culture, especially Black Twitter. It pushes in whatever direction we want to push. So yeah, doing what we're doing that, but also in addition to that, adding our own vocal, our own dollar, and actually acting on the things we say. That's the problem with something like Twitter. We say it, we complain, like you mentioned, and you know whether we get it or we don't get it, we don't really move on the shit. We say the shit.
Yeah, I think to play off of what he just said, but to go back to what was pointed out about, you know, these Russian robots. I mean, we need to have just as much of a powerful force within the technology and its utilization to send, you know, magnified messaging through those who are savvy with the technology and well-versed in the algorithms and manipulations to establish those self-same largesse of viral communication.
So we need our own bots.
Yes, exactly.
That's what I'm hearing. We need our own bots.
It's on. It's on. And we need to.
We had plenty of that in
engage
America.
that
Yeah, there was some classic, just good old-fashioned American racism when it came to episode 8 as well.
Yeah,
so
that too.
there's that. Young lady in the back. Yes.
And the gentleman.
Yeah, I got you right.
Yeah.
No, yeah. I said I got him after you.
Okay. Well, it's going back to also having more say behind the camera, being more producers, being more writers, being more directors, etc. But also encouraging us to go into those fields. Because, I mean, I'm a teacher, and I know that, like, most of my students, if they're thinking anything artistically, it's rapping or singing. Or, you know, whatever. It's always something in front of the camera. And I'm just like, well, you know, you might want to be an athlete, but I'm getting in. You know. So definitely also encouraging, because right now we have a large push for minorities to go into like STEM, and I have nothing against being in science, technology, engineering, and math fields or anything like that. But if we want to see more diversity on like, how many of us are really majoring in film? How many of us are majoring in production or things like that? Or, you know, how many little kids are running around with video cameras actually making their own music? Nowadays it's a little bit easier because I got a camera in their hand, and they got the whole TikTok thing on there, but also teaching our youth ownership of what it is that they make. I mean, if anything, that TikTok or the little blip of a boycott, you know, proves something, but it needs to be more than that because, like, you know, it's so live that we create culture.
Yep.
But we don't ever really have ownership of
Especially when it comes to TikTok.
There needs to be a slogan when you come into this country that says it's been benefiting off Black labor since its inception.
Absolutely.
But, you know, and it's still doing it, but if people are not aware of it and they're not taking ownership of it, then it's going to be a little bit harder. We can have production houses by now that are making our own film stuff. There needs to be more than just our film.
Thank you. I'm glad you said it because I was going to say it when you finished if you didn't.
And it needs to be more than Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry makes a movie that we price.
There is an audience. Yep. Yep.
You know, it's just, that's my point. There needs to be more diversity behind the scenes, but it needs to also be built up from young so that they know that this is a possibility or a career that they can go into.
Yep. Absolutely.
Sir?
Hi, everybody. My name's Freddie, and it's the same exact point that I was going to raise. I saw a couple of kids here at BlerdCon dressed up and really participating in what this event has to offer. And I do think that it's critical that all of us should share our passion with the youth. Kids that are in school, kids who are trying to really expand their writing abilities, artistic capabilities, because it's these companies that are looking and need that talent, right? So if you're able to kind of
motivate our children, tell them like, hey, this is possible, you're in the future, you're the ones that are able to tell our stories, and start at a young age. I do think that in years to come, we will see that everything that we talked about today come to fruition. And that's going to be as a result of, events like these, bringing these conversations back to our community, which I'm sure here we're all coming from different parts, so it's important for us to continue those conversations. So,
Absolutely.
Misty, you have a question?
Somebody talked about Disney stock.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I was going to echo feedback on that. I was one share of Disney stock doing very well. And I'm very proud of it, but I would love to see a collection, an organized group of Disney stockholders that are interested in seeing these more diverse stories come to light. Like some kind of things get organized, like, hey, not only are we fans, but we also are investors.
Yep. Yep.
Do we have time for one
We
more?
got time for one more.
Oh, yes, this young lady.
Donna, she, her. I also think we need to foster the understanding that diversity is not just for that group. So
Right.
having a black person is not for just the black people. White, cis men need to see diversity too. We all need to see. I'm a straight woman. I need to see gay characters on the screen. I need to see. I'm black. I need to see Asian characters. I need to see. We all need to see all of that so we can foster that understanding that diversity benefits us all, not just the particular group that's being represented.
Absolutely. I was gonna say I'm very, very happy with that being kind of the last comment because I wanted to, because obviously we love y'all, but we got to do our shameless plug too.
Yeah. We would take more questions, but we already got the wrap it up sign that just came in the door. So.
So with that, first and foremost, I want to thank everybody, especially all of you that were here for the entire conversation, for joining us today. We thought it was just going to be us and a couple of our friends, and that was it. So thank all of you for showing us the love. You can find us. We are the Concentrated Podcast. We are everywhere that podcasts are. We are not normally this shy or this clean lace. We use a lot of profanity, so our podcast is not for children. But if you want to laugh and hear us talk about all of these things and more, you can find us, like I said, anywhere our podcasts are. We are on Facebook as the Concentrated Podcast, and we are on Twitter and Instagram as at Concentrated Pod. But we old, y'all, so for real, listen to the podcast, and if you really want to interact with us, find us on Facebook. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of your time.
Oh my God. So exciting. Well done, you. Well done, all of them.